this video, I'm going to explore a range of responses to the Section A questions that appeared on the AQA June 2017 English Language Paper 1. The exam paper and the insert, which includes the extract, can be downloaded from the address that appears in the description section under the video. I'll also put the extract up on the screen so that you can pause the video and read it without printing it out. For clarity, this is an extract from a short story entitled The Tiredness of Rosabel by Katherine Mansfield. Please note that these are not exhaustive answers, nor are they exemplars. Rather than there being one correct answer, there are any number of answers which, with justification from the text, are as valid as one another. Presenting an exemplar answer runs the risk of effectively dismissing as wrong other interpretations or ideas that you may have had simply by not considering them. As a consequence, there is much more analysis here than you would ever have time to include under exam conditions. What you will find here, therefore, is a range of observations and analysis which could be said, rather than which should be said, in response to the questions. So to start, here is the extract if you don't already have it printed out. Don't forget to read the introductory section here, as it will help you to put what you are reading into context. Question 1. Read again the first part of the source, lines 1 to 5. List 4 things about Rosabel from this part of the source. This question is worth 4 marks. This is the warm-up question and it should be relatively straightforward to get full marks on it, although mistakes can be made if you're not careful. Make sure that you only include information from the section indicated. You will not get any credit for anything outside of it, such as her feet were horribly wet, as this appears on line 8. It's a good idea to put some kind of bracket down the margin in order to mark out the section. You can either quote from the text or paraphrase, which just means that you can put it in your own words. Don't copy whole chunks, as this does not provide evidence of your ability to select information. It's also a waste of time. Make sure that you limit your response to Rosabel, although in this source there isn't a lot which isn't about her. Even though the section of text is only 5 lines long, there are more than 4 things to say, which gives you some choice. You could say that she bought a bunch of violets, that she had had a scone and a boiled egg and a cup of cocoa for tea, that she worked in a hat shop, that she'd worked hard all day, that she swung onto the step of the bus, that she grabbed her skirt with one hand, that she clung to the railing of the bus with the other hand, and that she wanted a dinner that was hot and strong and filling. So going on to question 2. This question will always ask you to analyse how a writer has used language in a section of the text to describe something or to achieve a certain effect, and will suggest the kinds of things to look at. Look in detail at this extract from lines 6 to 14 of the source. How does the writer use language here to describe Rosabel's journey home? You could include the writer's choice of words and phrases. These include nouns, adjectives, verbs, adverbs, and the descriptive phrases which include them. Language features and techniques. These include metaphor, simile, onomatopoeia, polysyndeton, alliteration, etc. Sentence forms. These include long and short sentences, questions, exclamations, ellipsis, parentheses, etc. This question is worth 8 marks, and so you should spend about 10 minutes on it. Make sure you read the question carefully so that you fully understand what it is asking you to do. Note that it says that you could include, not that you should include. The AQA guidance states that there isn't always anything meaningful to be said about sentence forms, and you should avoid doing it just for the sake of it. Analysis should always explore how form reflects meaning, and you run the risk of forcing an analysis which will be too general and you won't get any credit for it. The writer employs language which appeals to the senses of sight, touch and smell to describe the bus journey home from Rosabel's point of view. She uses contrasting imagery to show the difference between Rosabel's perception of the world that she sees pass by outside of the bus to that she experiences inside. The way in which the light plays on the misty windows turns their dullness into opal and silver. The use of words relating to gemstones and precious metals suggesting beauty in the changing quality of the light as the bus moves along. These reflections transform the jewellers' shops into metaphorical fairy palaces, with their associations of a world out of reach both literally and metaphorically to Rosabel, which sparkles and is full of magic. Her fantasy is brought to an abrupt halt, however, as she turns her attention to the reality of her position inside the bus, which is the exact opposite. The writer uses language which contrasts with what has come before, as she describes how Rosabel is physically uncomfortable with horribly wet feet and a skirt which is caked in black, greasy mud. This image of dirt continues as she realises that there is a sickening smell of warm humanity coming from her fellow passengers. The hissing sibilance of sickening smell helps to evoke her distaste at the unpleasant body odour which is released when a number of rain-soaked, unwashed people are confined in a small space. In the case of this extract, there is something worthwhile mentioning about the sentence forms Mansfield chooses to employ. Here she uses parenthesis, indicated by dashes, to interrupt the sentence to emphasise the way the smell seems to be oozing out of everybody. The verb oozing out usually describes a liquid which is slowly seeping or trickling out, and indicates that the writer is employing synesthesia here to give the odour an almost physical presence in order to convey its pungency and unpleasant nature. Looking around the bus, Rosabel observes that everybody had the same expression, sitting so still, staring in front of them. There is no individuality to the people on the bus. They are all so worn down and exhausted by life that they appear vacant. The smell, as well as this realisation, make Rosabel feel almost stifled or claustrophobic, both physically, evidenced by the way she unfastened the two top buttons of her coat, and emotionally, as she experiences a feeling of being trapped in her life where everything appears meaningless. I'm now going to skip to question 4 and come back to question 3 at the end. Question 3 calls for very different skills to those language skills required for both questions 2 and 4, and it's easier to deal with those together. You might also want to consider answering the questions in this order in the exam, and I'll explain why in more detail when we tackle question 3. So, question 4 is, focus this part of your answer on the second part of the source, from line 19 to the end. A student said, this part of the story, set in the hat shop, shows that the red-haired girl has many advantages in life, and I think Rosabel is right to be angry. To what extent do you agree? In your response, you could consider your own impressions of the red-haired girl. So what kind of a person do you think she is? Evaluate how the writer conveys Rosabel's reactions to the red-haired girl. So how does the writer use language to convey these, and how well has the writer done this? support your response with references to the text. This, of course, should go without saying. So this question is an evaluative question. Not only does it require you to analyse language, as in question 2, but it requires you to give your opinion about how well the writer has achieved their effects. Evaluative words and phrases include ones such as successfully, clearly, vividly, colourfully. The reader is able to picture. The reader is able to visualise. The reader is able to understand how. The first thing I'm going to do is set out my general position on the statement, i.e. that I agree with it up to a certain point. There is indeed evidence in the passage that the red-haired girl does have many advantages in life, but although we can understand why Rosabel ends up feeling angry, it's probably more accurate to say that we think Rosabel's anger is not entirely justifiable, as the girl does nothing to deliberately offend her. Firstly, the girl is clearly very physically attractive. She has beautiful red hair and a white skin, which contrasts with Rosabel's own unremarkable brown hair. Her eyes are the colour of that green ribbon shot with gold they had got from Paris last week. This vivid image associated with a luxury item from the fashion capital of the world suggests that the girl's beauty is elegant, radiant, and exotic. The combination of the red, white and green in the girl's colouring clearly evokes a beauty which is very striking. The reader is also able to appreciate how very privileged she is, as she has her own carriage and seems to spend her days shopping for hats and being taken out for lunch. The way in which she glanced at Rosabel laughingly suggests that she leads a very carefree existence. This is a far cry from Rosabel's own life, and so it's not surprising if she feels not a little envious and resentful. When the girl says to Rosabel, "Let me see how it looks on you," for a very short time their lives overlap, as Rosabel is able to see herself in a hat that the girl will also wear. The reader is able to understand that, for Rosabel, the hat symbolises everything in life that she will never be in a position to have, and so, when the girl tactlessly tells her that it suits her beautifully, we can tell that Rosabel feels as though she is taunting her with the knowledge that she will never have a better life. This in turn triggers a sudden, ridiculous feeling of anger in her. The adjective sudden implies that this fury comes out of nowhere, and the adjective ridiculous suggests that even Rosabel herself realises that it is absurd and unreasonable. The way in which the girl swept out to her carriage clearly reveals that she is oblivious to the pain she has inadvertently caused Rosabel. Although the red-haired girl is undoubtedly privileged in a number of ways, nothing she does in her interaction with Rosabel is meant maliciously, and so Rosabel's anger, although understandable, is not justifiable. The girl is just as much a product of the rigid British class system as Rosabel, and so cannot be blamed. So now on to question 3. I would recommend that this question, if at all possible, should be tackled after you have done questions 2 and 4. The reason being that the terminology and what you are expected to analyse in this question are completely different. It uses up brain power to switch from one form of analysis to another and then back again, and you also run the risk of lapsing into language rather than structural analysis. Question 3. You now need to think about the whole of the source. This text is from the beginning of a short story. How has the writer structured the text to interest you as a reader? You could write about what the writer focuses your attention on at the beginning of the source, how and why the writer changes this focus as the source develops, any other structural features that interest you. This question is worth 8 marks, which means that you get about 10 minutes to answer it. In my video, which focuses on how to approach this question, I recommend, as per AQA's advice, that you provide an overview of the extract structure before going into detail with specific examples from the beginning, the middle, and the end. By overview, I mean a brief description of the whole arc of the piece. The first third of the piece begins by establishing Rosabel's social position and by focusing on her private thoughts and feelings as she travels home after work. The final 2/3 comprise a flashback to her day in the shop. The reader now gets to see Rosabel's public persona and how the class system works in practice. The focus of the text narrows as she thinks about one customer in particular, her interactions with whom providing the reader with a fully rounded and sympathetic understanding of Rosabel's character and actions. At the beginning of the extract, we're introduced to the character of Rosabel from whose perspective the story is told. The very first thing that we learn, which establishes its significance, is that Rosabel bought a bunch of violets, even though that was practically the reason why she had so little tea. We then learn about her social situation, that she's had a hard day's work in a hat shop, and she would have sacrificed her soul for a good dinner. She's clearly hungry, poor, and lower class. The reader is therefore left with the question, what could possibly have happened to make her waste her money on a bunch of violets if she doesn't have enough food to eat? This seemingly irrational behaviour arouses the reader's curiosity so that they read on to find out the reason. Her journey home also seems to reveal a dissatisfaction with her lot in life, as we learn that she feels almost stifled by the oppressive atmosphere in the bus. Mansfield uses time as a structural feature, employing a flashback to all that had happened during the day, until Rosabel's focus settles on a particularly memorable customer. We now see Rosabel's public persona, which is revealed through dialogue, as that of a lower-class shop girl who has to be subservient to her upper-class customers. Mansfield's focus on describing the customer's physical beauty, her beautiful red hair and white skin and eyes the colour of that green ribbon shot with gold they had got from Paris last week, and her laughingly carefree manner, is a direct contrast to the brown-haired and careworn Rosabel, and helps to create a stark distinction between the upper and lower classes. The girl making Rosabel try the hat on and unwittingly taunting her with what she can never have by remarking that it suits you beautifully, constitutes a watershed moment for Rosabel, as it triggers a sudden, ridiculous feeling of anger, which she is compelled to keep hidden at all costs, as she bends over the hat, flushing. This is a key point in the text for the reader, as they now understand her seemingly irrational behaviour of buying the violets at the beginning. Her determination to buy herself something pretty to make herself feel better, even though she cannot afford it, we can now see to be a consolation for her feelings of envy, resentment and despair, brought about by one momentary glimpse of what her life can never be. In doing this, Mansfield creates a complex character with whom the reader is able to sympathise. The structure of this extract is also circular in nature, as in the final line, the red-haired girl tells her male companion, as she swept out to her carriage, that she shall go straight home and put the hat on before I come out to lunch with you. We're reminded of the beginning, not only of Rosabel's totally different journey home, uncomfortable and crowded on the bus, but also of her hunger. The reader is left with a sense of pathos evoked by the social injustice of the class system. Some women are in a position of privilege where they can eat as well as have something pretty. For others, it is a stark choice between the two. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments section below, and I'll do my best to answer them. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more videos on English language topics and exam techniques, and English literature texts.